spent a good deal of my I spent a good deal of my career uh, within the federal sector in the government, and people take federal jobs for a lot of different reasons. The biggest one, principally, is um, control and security. One of the things about working in the federal government is that you get to specialize in something. So if you're an environmental person and you want to protect natural resources, you can go into the federal government and do something like that. You can spend a career doing that. And you don't have to be beholden to a particular constituency. And this is irrespective of who is the president, which party is in office. I was at the Justice Department during the Reagan and Bush administrations, but it you didn't see all that much change. You saw a change in focus, change in policy, but your day-to-day operations were pretty much the same, no matter who was the president. And so there were different focuses, and people thought one thing was more important than the other. But people took jobs in the federal sector because you had job security, you had dependability, and what you worked for was the public good, however that was defined. You weren't out to make a profit. You didn't need to bill your hours to a particular person or individual or company. You There was no sense of profit or loss. It was a public sector job was dedicated towards some sense of the public good. What we have seen most recently is that a lot of those things that were draws for the public sector are not only gone in the current administration, but may be gone forever. The principal one is the idea of stability, that if you had a government job, you could always be fired for misconduct or the like. You could always get a RIF. And I remember going through 7 or 8 different shutdowns and RIFs within the public sector. But those were generally budgetary things that dealt with the relationship between Capitol Hill and the executive branch, or that dealt with differing budget priorities. What has happened now is that we see that entire sections of the federal government may fall out of favor and therefore be eliminated. And they can be eliminated without any of the participants having done anything wrong or improper. So what I'll be talking about is how to reshape your mindset, how to reshape your resume, your cover letter, and your job performance from the federal sector to the private sector. Because there are certain ways of speaking, ways of addressing problems, ways of writing a resume, things that you focus on when you're in the federal sector that are not important to the private sector. In fact, may hinder your ability to find a job in the private sector. And as a former prosecutor, you know, a lot of the people I dealt with there were law enforcement. They were FBI, they were Secret Service, they were postal inspectors, they were naval intelligence, people like that, or they were in the intelligence sector, FBI, counterintelligence division, CIA, NSA, some of the DIA and other agencies like that. And there was a certain way that they spoke, and there was a certain mindset, and there was a certain way that they communicated that told you that they were with the government. An easy one is, you know, you don't take vacation. You're on leave or on PTO. I always knew when I was talking to an FBI agent because they would never say, "Hey, can you hold on a second?" They would always say, "Stand by." There were certain words that they used that tipped you off that they were government people. Now, in Washington, you have a lot of government contractors as well. And government contractors are private sector individuals who become the government. So they are almost all populated by former government employees who still speak gov speak, as I call it. What I want to do is talk about how what you should be doing if you've been recently transferred, laid off, put on temporary suspended status, whatever you are, and you're looking to move from the federal government to the private sector. I would love to be giving a speech the other way around, how to move from the private sector to the federal government, because that also is a transition, but we are where we are. If you have any questions during the presentation, I urge you to put them in the chat, and Jody will read them to me. Okay. So the first thing is some of the differences between the federal sector and the private sector. There are a lot of differences in the in the private sector in terms of pay, pay structure, promotional opportunity, how you get hired, how you get fired, how you get paid, what is expected of you. Federal sector hiring is slow, regulated, and emphasizes stability. And when I was applying for a job with the federal government, I had to fill out an SF-71 form, which was 40 pages long, list every place I had ever worked. They wanted to know the addresses and phone numbers of my landlords at the apartments I lived in college. I had no clue. The names and phone numbers of every supervisor at every job I had ever had. I had no clue. And I spent literally weeks gathering all of that information and including that in my resume and my SF-171. Because the job I had required TSI security clearance, I also had to fill out a bunch of forms in order to get that as well. Then it took weeks and weeks of a full background investigation with the FBI going out and interviewing my friends and relatives and ensuring that I was not a security threat, questioning the fact that my mother had been born in Germany as to whether or not I might be contacted by East Germans, questioning my best friend who is Korean about whether or not I was a good American. Even got to the point where I got a phone call asking me whether the FBI agent who had called me to do the background investigation was calling from a government phone and therefore defrauding the government by making long distance phone calls. It was nuts. So there's this whole culture of compliance. There's a whole culture of regulation. There's a whole culture of bureaucracy. It is slow. It is regulated. They have to look at a whole bunch of factors in bringing somebody on board. But once you are onboarded, you have a lot of stability once you're in the job. It is rare that someone is fired from the federal government without either massively screwing up, unless they're in an appointed job, a plum book job, or if their department is eliminated. So it's hard to get in, but once you're in, you typically remain there. And it also emphasizes stability in the idea that once you become acclimated to a particular agency or department, you know how it works and what it does. You will pretty that knowledge is what really serves you well in the public sector. That's not true in the private sector. In fact, very few parts of that are true. In the private sector, it's faster to hire. They may have their own bureaucracies and the like, but they have the ability to interview you in the morning and onboard you the next day if they want to. They have a completely different structure in terms of reporting, in terms of pay, in terms of bonuses, in terms of compensation. It is effectively whatever they want it to be. So things like grants of stock, grants of a bonus structure, bonus criteria, all completely different. So you have to be prepared for that. When you go to a job in the federal government, you know how much it pays. If it's a GS-15, you know what that pays. If it's an SES, you know what that pays. In the private sector, the two people sitting right next to each other with the same job can be paid vastly different salaries. So negotiation for compensation in the private sector is a lot different than negotiation for compensation in the public sector. In the public sector, performance evaluations are rigid with specified criteria. Doesn't mean they're not completely arbitrary. They are, but they're arbitrary within a structure. Within the private sector, the performance criteria can be little things like how well do you get along with your coworkers or your boss. They also the metrics tend to be profit driven rather than performance driven. So you can be doing a great job. I have a relative who works for a big law firm, and one of the things we were talking about is he was doing a great job. because he's a very, very brilliant lawyer. Being a brilliant lawyer, you would think would be a job criteria for being in a big law firm. But if you had a choice at a big law firm for me having an average lawyer that is a lawyer who doesn't screw up, but bills a ton of hours and makes a lot of money for the firm, or a brilliant lawyer who makes wonderfully creative arguments, wins cases for the clients, but doesn't bill as much, which one do you want? And the question is whether or not a law firm is a profession or a business. If you look at it as a profession, you want to keep and retain and hire brilliant lawyers. If you think of it as a business, you want as many of these people who can bill as many hours as possible. So the compensation structure is going to be a lot different depending on what they're looking for. What that means is as you're looking for a job, you need to match your resume and your interview and your performance to what it is they're looking for, as opposed to what they have advertised. All right. So you have to also adapt to new expectations and new cultures. A couple of things when I was in the private sector, in the government sector. In the government sector, there are various types of people who are attracted to the federal government, and I'm generalizing here on purpose. But when I worked at the Justice Department, you had people who, one of the big questions is, if you work for the federal government, are you being overpaid or underpaid? And there's a whole perception out there that federal government workers are overpaid, that the average salary for federal workers is about 20% higher than the average salary for non-government workers. But that's because of the nature of the jobs in the government sector as opposed to in the private sector. We do not have many federal jobs involving cashiers or home healthcare workers or farmers or crop pickers or something or any low wage jobs. There are low wage jobs in the federal sector, but the vast majority of the jobs in the federal sector tend to be administrative or bureaucratic, which requires higher degrees of education and also higher degrees of pay. So if you look at the average federal worker opposed to the average non-federal worker, the average federal worker is paid more, including if you include salary and benefits. And that's because a lot of private sector jobs pay fewer benefits, no benefits at all. But if you look comparing apples to apples, a job, for example, regulating financial services or being in financial services, the federal sector employees are much lower paid than their private sector companions. And so as a result, there's this whole idea that the regulators want to spend a certain amount of time doing regulation, then move over to the private sector where they can get more money. So this wage and compensation gap is different. The cultures are different. The incentives are different. The compensation structures are different. So we need to adapt that. And now we'll get into what we're really going to be focusing on here is how we can use artificial intelligence, AI programs. I'm going to be focusing on ChatGPT, but it's only one of them. ChatGPT is a particular kind of generative artificial intelligence, generative AI. There are lots of other programs, and I'll talk about some of them, that have AI type models built into them. But ChatGPT is the one I'll be focusing on most because it is more universal. It can be adapted to a lot of different things, as opposed to a specific AI program designed to look at resumes or something like that. So we'll talk about how you can use AI programs to handle your recent unemployment, if that's what happened, to identify what job skills you have, to translate job skills from public sector to private sector, to rewrite resumes, to find jobs, to apply for jobs, and to write cover letters and to do follow-up interview training and the like. And we'll go through some samples of that, and I'll show you how I do it. Your results may vary.
Now, one of the things in the book that you got this manual that I wrote, um, you have literally hundreds of prompts that you can use in sort of directing your job search that you can use in an AI program. Also, dozens of ways to rephrase federal sector job descriptions into a private sector. So we'll talk about that. Now I'm going to unshare for just a second. All right. So before I go back into the slides, what I want to talk about now is the nature of artificial intelligence, what it is, what it isn't, what ChatGPT is in the area of artificial intelligence, what it isn't, and then a little bit about where AI is going and what its limitations are. Because I think it's important to understand that the kind of artificial intelligence that we have right now that we're talking about is not a panacea. We are about 4 years into the generative AI revolution. Artificial intelligence in various forms has been around for about 35 to 40 years. The idea of making a thinking machine that can mimic human intelligence has been around since around the 1970s. There are various forms of artificial intelligence, heuristics, machine learning, and the like. And that is the idea of there are various ways to program things. One is to say, if then, and all early computer programs were if then. If you see this, then do that. If you see this, then do that. And the problem with those types of programs was it was virtually impossible to anticipate every possible problem. And so we needed a program that would be able to adapt to new solutions, new problems, and apply what it had already learned to a new situation. And so they started developing programs that were machine learning that would say, okay, I've detected a pattern of how you answer the questions, what you do. If I see that pattern, I will do what you have done. And these things were used for sales and marketing, for writing computer code and the like. What differentiates modern AI from those machine learning programs is the fact that the AI program writes itself. So instead of me writing code to solve a problem, I create AI to identify the problem and it generates the code to solve the problem, which means that the people who wrote the AI program have no idea how it works. You can't debug an AI program because you haven't written the AI program. You've written the AI program, but it writes itself. Now, generally, there are two broad categories of artificial intelligence. There are directed or undirected AI. And let me give you some examples. If I wanted, I'm the owner of a baseball team and I want to be successful. The first question we have is if I'm the owner of a baseball team, how do I define success? And you would all say, well, a successful baseball team is the one that wins more games than the other teams. And the first problem we have is that's not the definition of a successful baseball team. The definition of a successful baseball team is one that makes me the most amount of money. And I can make more money if I can make more money losing than winning, then it will then my goal is to lose rather than to win. But putting that aside, let's assume that I want to win games. There's two things I can do with an AI program. One, I can tell it the rules of baseball. These are the rules. This is first base. Second, these are the positions. This is the goal. This is the objective. These are the strategies that have been deployed. These are the unwritten rules of baseball, and sort of train it the same way we teach a little leaguer how to play baseball. When my older son, who's left-handed, was playing t-ball, And he gets up to the base, and like everybody else is standing in the right side batter's box, and he gets in the left side batter box because he's left-handed. Toss the ball, he hits the ball, runs to third base. Why? Because that was natural for him to run to third rather than running to first because he's left-handed. So we train him. No, no, no. Run to first base. That's what you need to do. So, all of these rules about what's an out, what's a slide, all of that stuff you teach. And then you say, based on what you have learned about baseball, what should I be doing? And they'll say, well, you shouldn't bunt as much because that gives an out for advancing a runner, but we find statistically that's not useful, or more line drives, fewer pop-ups, whatever else it is, and it tells you things that strategies it should deploy in different situations. The other way, that's called directed learning. And so what we do in directed learning is we train the model into what we want it to learn, and then we ask it hypotheticals based on what we've trained it to do. The other way is untrained or undirected learning. And in undirected learning, we tell it nothing. We just say, watch every baseball game ever played. You figure out the rules. You figure out what's important. You develop a strategy for winning based on what you have learned. Now, the advantage of a directed learning is that it's much faster. It organizes the thoughts of the AI program and focuses it on what's important. The disadvantages of directed learning is that when you do directed learning, we have already imposed our biases on the program. And I'll give you three examples. One is they wanted to train an AI program to determine the difference between dogs and wolves. So when you look at a photograph, you can almost instantly, in most cases, determine whether or not what the thing depicted is a dog or a wolf. How do you know that? You have no idea how you know that. You've seen lots of pictures of dogs, you've seen lots of pictures of wolves, and you just know the difference. If you were to try to explain the difference, you'd have a hard time doing it. Well, wolves are larger. Well, there are dogs that are larger than wolves. Wolves have a particular amount of fur, okay, but so do some dogs. What is the difference? You won't be able to do it. So what you can do is you can take an AI program and you can feed it pictures of dogs and wolves. Dog, dog, wolf, wolf, dog, wolf, wolf, dog, whatever. And you predefine what it is. Feed the pictures in, and then say, I am training the AI program to learn what I have already learned, which is the difference between a dog and a wolf. Okay. And if you do that training, one of the things that you will find is that when the AI program tries to determine if something is a dog or a wolf, the one thing it's going to be looking for is snow. Because almost all pictures of wolves are going to be taken outside. Often in the winter when wolves are more active, and often when there's snow. Whereas most pictures of dogs are taken inside, or if they're outside, it's usually in any season. And so the biggest predictor of whether or not somebody is a dog or a wolf is whether there's snow in the picture. Because the AI program does not know what things are significant and which things are insignificant, it will treat the presence of snow just as significantly as the presence of a long snout or thick fur. Similarly, they were trying to train an AI program to detect which moles or scars or lesions were cancerous and which ones weren't. So they fed him pictures and said cancer based on just the image itself, but they told the AI program which ones were turned out to be malignant and which ones turned out to be benign. And they were trying to train the model to say, based on the image alone, can you tell me whether it's likely to be malignant or benign? And they would feed all these pictures in. And the thing that determined whether or not it was likely to be malignant was the presence or absence of a ruler. Because when something had been determined by a human to be malignant, what was important is to determine the size of the lesion. But if it was benign, it didn't matter how big it was. So in all the pictures where the human had already determined that it was malignant, there was often a ruler. And so what you end up with is all this arbitrary stuff that happens. Okay. And so when you have an AI program trying to predict what is the most important factor in determining whether or not a baseball team is likely to win or lose a game, it will say the color of your socks. Why? Because the two winningest teams in the history of baseball are the New York Yankees and the Dodgers, both of whom wear blue socks. And it says, okay, so what I found is the one thing common among winning teams is that they wear blue socks because they can't tell the difference between correlation and causation because it doesn't know the rules. And they can't tell the difference between things that are relevant or things that are irrelevant. So what ends up happening is that you perpetrate also if you use data that has bias built into it, and when there are all these biases associated with artificial intelligence, the number one bias is that there's a bias towards things that can be measured. So if you're looking at trying to make a baseball team successful, you can look at bunting versus not bunting, sacrifice flies versus not sacrifice flies, speed versus power. But what you can't look at is camaraderie, uh, team team cohesion, happiness. Okay, you could measure things like the amount of sleep that they get, things like that, but it's very difficult to understand that. The second problem is an AI program will not know which things are important and which ones aren't. And the third thing is when an AI program is dealing with an adaptive environment, that is an environment that adapts to AI, it doesn't know what's relevant. And an example would be, let's say you wanted to determine which passengers on an airline flight are likely to be drug couriers. So you gather a whole bunch of data, feed it in there, and they say, okay, drug couriers are typically traveling from a Latin American country. They're typically young men. They will typically buy their tickets in cash. They will typically buy their tickets within a few days of the travel. They will not buy a return flight, and they will book a seat in first class near the aisle so they can get off the plane quickly. Whatever profile you have found. So now you feed it in, you look at all the data, and you say, aha, so this is my profile of a drug courier. Well, the first problem is there's a self-reinforcement. If you start stopping people who are young Hispanic men who bought their tickets in cash within a few days, traveled first class and sat in the aisle seat, and start searching them for drugs, some percentage of them are going to be drug couriers. Let's say it's 2%. That will confirm what you look for. But you haven't stopped the other people who could be 4 or 5%. So you've now confirmed, oh, look, we found drug couriers in this profile. The profile must be correct. But you also forget the fact that the drug couriers are themselves want to avoid getting caught. So now they're going to start using white women traveling from Europe, buying their tickets with credit card weeks in advance, and traveling with babies and booking a return flight, whatever it is. And so you're always going to be behind the curve. So the data upon which we are training these programs is biased. The data is inaccurate. The data is incomplete. The data are often copyrighted. If I were to ask you, for example, to make a painting in the style of Vincent van Gogh, we all have a general idea of what Vincent van Gogh's style is, and we have some talent or whatever, we could try it. Or I could do Jackson Pollock, which would be easier. And one of the questions is, if you were to make a painting in the style of Jackson Pollock, would that constitute copyright infringement or trademark infringement? Whereas if you ask an AI program to do so, the answer might be different. It might constitute infringement. So there are a whole host of legal and policy and bias and prejudice issues. So, for example, if we were trying to ask, I have two applicants for a job, okay? One is a man, one is a woman. I want to pay them each what they are worth. So let's go back and look at historical pay data and see how much men are typically paid and how much women are typically paid, and pay them what they are worth. And what we end up doing in that case is we end up perpetuating previous biases because women were traditionally paid less for the same jobs or traditionally had jobs that paid less. And therefore, we have skewed the income scales and we just perpetuate. So these are all issues associated with AI. Another issue associated with AI has to do with data privacy. And that is, for AI to be truly effective, not only does it have to have a massive amount of training data, but it has to learn a massive amount about us. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So I'm going to take a short, not a break, but if there are any questions, Jody, did you cull any questions out of the chat?
Let me see. Um, in the okay. Okay. Here's a question. As a federal intelligence community member, my resume was approved by agencies. Since it was approved for public use, am I technically allowed to reframe the resume to cater to private industry? I was told that I cannot change and had to stay the same verbatim.
Yeah. Okay. So there are a couple of things. If you are in the intelligence community or have been in the intelligence community, what you are subject to what's called a pre-publication review. So anything that you publish, which includes your resume, has to be approved by the agency for public dissemination. If they have approved a government resume and have not approved it, what you need to do is take that and turn that into a private sector resume, and then get the government to approve that resume as well. And there are a number of reasons for that. So, for example, if you're working for a government agency, you may be working for a shell corporation. The CIA establishes a public corporation that really is owned and operated by the CIA. All right. The fact that you have a top secret security clearance and are working for a marketing company is a dead giveaway that that marketing company is not really a marketing company. It's actually a front for the CIA. If you have that on your resume, a smart, clever counterintelligence person can figure out, oh, wait, they work for the agency. The names of certain programs that you worked on may be classified. The places in which you were working geographically may be classified. Even your level of security clearance itself may be classified. For example, if you look at people's LinkedIn profiles, they will frequently put on their LinkedIn profiles or their resumes what their security clearance is. And they'll say, hold a top secret security clearance, hold an SCI security clearance. If I was being hired in the private sector or the government sector and somebody put on their resume what their security clearance was, I would not hire them. Because putting your security clearance on your resume is a way to allow you to be targeted by foreign intelligence operations. They want to go after people who have high level security clearances. And you've just told them you have a high level security clearance. A better approach is to say that you have a clearance or you're eligible for a clearance and that you will provide them with what that clearance is at some later date. but you should not be advertising what your security clearance is. All right. So what you do is you take your government, your approved government resume, turn that into a private sector resume, and then get that private sector resume approved.
And Mark, this is a follow-up to that question. If you
Yeah.
work for multiple intelligence agencies, do you have to submit the resume to all of those agencies? One of the agencies I previously worked in said they were only approving their portion of the resume.
But that is typical. Now, okay, so that has a lot to do with who has approving authority. The better approach is to have each agency clear that portion of the resume, because they will know better than the other agency what terms and phrases are classified and not classified within that specific agency. All right?
Okay, and
The
then
closer you keep your resume to what has already been approved, the more likely it is that it'll be approved. Now you run into another little problem here as well. Let's assume that you work for intelligence agencies A, B, and C, and you have paragraph 1, intelligence agency A, paragraph 2, B, paragraph C, intelligence agency C. Intelligence agency B may not be allowed to see the classified portion of what was in intelligence agency A, because they're not cleared for it. They're not an originating authority. They aren't cleared for it, and they had no need to know. So the higher your clearance, the more difficult this becomes. But one of the things you can do is you can just take the paragraph from the resume that relates to the job with intelligence agency A and send that to intelligence agency A for approval. Yep.
another question, with your example about training the AI model to distinguish between a dog and a wolf, how do we ensure our resume is not dismissed by the ATS model?
Okay, so we'll get into how you build a resume for ATS. ATS is applicant tracking system. And then how you modify a resume based on the ATS system. The goal here, though, is this is the analogy I give. Leonardo da Vinci had this thing called Leonardo's horse. It was the most beautiful, large equestrian statue. He never actually completed it. But the question was, how do you build such a beautiful statue of a horse? And the answer is you get a piece of marble and you cut away everything that doesn't look like a horse. And that's what you're doing when you're using AI. You're starting with a resume and cutting away everything that doesn't look like a horse. So you're building your resume not for a human to read, but for an ATS system to read. But at the end of the day, it's your horse. You have to make sure that that resume is you. This resume is not written by an AI program. It's your resume written by you with the assistance of an AI program. And at the end of the day, when the AI program is done with it and spits it out, you still need to read it and you still need to make it your own.
Have another good question here. Okay. Someone said the problem is that if we are using chat GPT to cater our Fed to industry, we can't put our Fed resume into chat GPT to translate it to cater to the private industry when they're talking. I guess they're in intelligence.
Well, if your Fed resume is approved, in other words, is unclassified because it's been approved, then you can if you could put your Fed resume out at a conference or a speech or whatever, then you can put it into Chat GPT. I would, however, remove from my Fed resume, even if it's been approved, any reference to specific security clearances or specific projects by code words. That should never pass the filter in the first place. Okay. The other thing, and what we'll talk about is, is converting it from a performance resume to a skills resume, and that will be easier. Okay, next.
And then we'll do one more question, and then I'll have you go on, and then we'll get back to questions after you continue your presentation. Someone said, I have 25 years of experience. This is I'm sure a lot of people are thinking of this. Do I
Yep.
need to limit my resume to 2 pages? Can I use a functional resume so I can highlight relevant experience, which is older up front?
Okay. So that's a great question. I hate people who say, by the way, that's a great question, because that implies that the other questions were not great. All right. In an interview, when you say that's a great question, that's your chance to pause. Okay. That's a great question. I have no idea how to answer it. Give me 5 seconds. I'm thinking, and then you pause. Okay. But there are a number of things. One of the things is you are going to want to write it as a functional resume. Here's the problem. You're going to write this wonderful functional resume. It's going to focus on your 30 years of experience rather than job 1, job 2, job 3, job 4, which will end up being 15 pages long, right? And then you're going to feed it into an ATS system, which is going to try to figure out, okay, how do I make this into the kind of resume I'm used to? Job 1, job 2, job 3, job 4. So you're going to have something like a hybrid functional resume. You're still going to use the structure of a chronological resume, but you're going to make it functional. Second thing is, how do you turn a job where you've had 15 different jobs within, say, 3 or 4 government agencies, but multiple functions, into a 2-page resume? The two-page resume is not an absolute requirement. But if you have what looks like multiple jobs, what it makes it look like is you can't hold the job. So, for example, at the Justice Department, I worked for 4 different divisions within 4 different sections within the division of the Justice Department, and we had substantially different roles and responsibilities. So I made all of that into one job, even though they were in different positions, and then subsections within it. So that's what you want to do is sort of make it look like there was one job. Okay.
And we always encourage you highlighting your, not your years of experience, but your expertise, and highlighting your accomplishments, as opposed to I did this, this, and this. Really talking about your accomplishments. And this is a really good question because, and I think you can answer this very quickly. Do you recommend creating a tailored resume for every private sector job? Yes. Or do you
Yes.
use the same 2-page resume and tailor the cover letter only?
Okay,
No.
so there are a couple of things I do. Okay. Number one, I have a tailored resume for every kind of job that I would be looking for. So, for example, in my field, I'm a lawyer and I'm a litigator, I'm a trial lawyer, and I have 35 years of experience doing white collar criminal practice. If I were looking for a job in a law firm doing white collar criminal practice, which would include a whole bunch of other stuff, my resume would scream white collar litigator. I'm also a data privacy lawyer. If I was looking for a job in the private sector to do data privacy, my resume would look substantially different. The skill sets they were looking for, the experience, the acronyms they're looking for are completely different. So it would scream data privacy specialist who happens to be a lawyer. If they're looking for a data privacy officer, it will say lawyer specializing in data privacy. If they're looking for cybersecurity, it's going to be regulatory compliance person who knows everything about cybersecurity, also happens to be a lawyer. If they're looking for a public policy person, my job will say decades of experience in public policy, a PhD in policy studies, worked on the following different policies. Oh, and by the way, blah, blah, blah. So I will have maybe 8 or 9 classes of resumes for different classes of jobs. And then I will tailor those resumes to the specific job I'm looking for. And I will walk you through how that's done and how you can use AI to help you do it. The problem is that your resume will not be read by a human being. It will be read by an ATS system. And so the more you match what the ATS system is looking for, the more likely your resume is to advance. And that's what you want to do. Yeah.
we got such, okay, last question that we're gonna go for, and then we're gonna answer everyone's questions, but do private companies care about awards received for government accomplishments, or should those be left off your resume?
The answer is those demonstrate experience and expertise in a particular area. Now, there was an old Napoleon said, I can make people march into battle for a piece of ribbon. So there are certain types of awards and stuff that people get for having not have been fired. Okay, and we all know those people who work for the federal government who have the countdown clock sitting on their desk. And I knew a bunch of FBI agents, they have these clocks on their desk that count backwards from their date of retirement. Okay. Or it's not in the federal sector, it wasn't date of retirement. It was date of eligibility to get a pension and start a second job while still getting money paid by the federal government. And then you've got people who work for the federal government because they can't get hired anywhere else. But the vast majority of people I knew at the federal government were people who worked there because they had a sense of mission. And the vast amount of awards were recognition for superior conduct, not just merely existing. Those types of things can be translated into skills and accomplishments or recognition that would be relevant to the private sector. So not all awards, it's sort of like the superlatives you got in high school. It's going to depend on what they are. But I got a whole bunch of awards, and then I got plaques for, but a lot of them were just for, working on a case with the FBI, the Secret Service, the CIA, whatever. There were commendations to that. On the other hand, there were some of them that were for developing a new program, developing something that really benefited somebody, things like that. Like the Attorney General's Advocacy Institute Award for the top litigator. That one I leave in. The other ones I left out. Okay.
Okay, so you go back. I have where we left off from questions. And so again, if people have questions, put them in chat, and Mark will come back to them after he continues his presentation.
Cool. Okay, so let's go back to this. All right. So I should advance now. There we go. All right. So the first thing is that I want to talk a little bit about mental health. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because it really is about AI. But one of the things you find in Washington, D.C. is when you meet somebody from Washington, D.C., and you're in the D.C. area and you meet them for the first time, the first or second question you're going to say is, what do you do? Because in Washington, and a few other cities, but mostly in Washington, your identity is tied up in what you do for a living. You are, I work for USAID. I do whatever it is you do for the Commerce Department or the State Department, or I work for the intelligence community. If they tell you they work for the intelligence community, that means that they don't. But so we obtain our sense of value, our sense of identity, our sense of purpose, our sense of belonging to a great extent based upon what we do. And when you are fired or terminated or let go or whatever, there is a deep emotional rift that goes on, because the first question is, who am I if I am no longer this? What is my purpose? What did I do wrong? Why do I have to go through this? And I want to encourage people to understand that, and that's even hurt worse by the fact that for legal and policy reasons, your termination probably said poor job performance or something like that, which is not the case. So you have to understand that if you've been laid off from the federal sector job, this is not about you. It's not about your performance. It's not about your value. But there is this whole sense of unmooring. And particularly because you have built a life, you have engaged in obligations, you bought a house, you've whatever, based upon this sort of unwritten promise that you will do a good job and you will continue to be employed by the federal government. And all of that has been disrupted. The other problem is that now you're looking for a private sector job, and so is everybody else. So you're competing against your friends, your relatives, your neighbors, your colleagues, and the like. So those are all big problems associated with it. So things you need to worry about is, what do I do in the short term? So the first thing I say is, I need a job. I need health care. I need health insurance. I've got to have a job. This is an opportunity for you to go back and say, what do I really want to be doing? Do I want to continue doing what I was doing before? Or do I want to make a transition? Am I looking for a job that is a steady paycheck? Or am I looking for a career? And so there's this tendency to say, okay, I've lost my job, I need to replace it, and you're going to start panic applying for jobs. And this is really an opportunity, and it may depend upon your individual financial situation. But a lot of people will sit there and go, I need to have any job, and they will take a job at a lower pay or lower scale because they need to have a job. If you can, use this as an opportunity to assess, what are my skills? What makes me happy? What do I want to do? And what job should I have? And I coach a lot of people on this type of thing. And if you were to say, what job do you have, you may say, I'm a program analyst, or whatever. And the first question I ask people is, what do you enjoy doing on a day-to-day basis? Do you like working with other people? Do you like solving problems? Do you like working collaboratively? Do you like working alone? Do you like being analytical? Do you like being social? What's the kind of things that you like to do? That's independent of what the job is, what the end product is, because a lot of what you're doing is process. All right. The other thing you want to do is, as soon as you get terminated, do things like, you will lose access to your computer and computer networks. So you need to collect any documentation, even before you're terminated, but even shortly thereafter, like performance reviews, clearance records, records of training, records of certifications, in advance of being fired or shortly thereafter, because you will not have access to those. And if it's a massive layoff, nobody around will have access to that either. So the kinds of things that you will need in order to demonstrate your qualifications for another job, you should be collecting those. That also includes things like pension records, records of FERS, or whatever your retirement system is, records related to healthcare, and the like as well. You want to collect all those records and have them with you. You want to apply for unemployment promptly if you are eligible for unemployment. One of the problems they have is you got people who are Schrodinger's cat. They're both working for the federal government and not working for the federal government simultaneously. So you may have been terminated. There's a lawsuit filed. It's pending. You're suspended pending that. You don't know what you're going to be. And in that case, that's an opportunity for you to decide whether you want to stay or leave the federal government. Don't blame yourself. You want to assess your financial situation, what benefits are you eligible for, and the like. And you want to use this opportunity to enhance whatever skills you might need. So if there's a certification that you didn't need because the government didn't need you to have it, but it might be useful in the private sector, explore the mechanisms for getting that certification now. Right. The other thing you want to do is clarify what your long-term career goals are. What do I want to be? Was the job that I had for 15 or 20 years really what I wanted to do? Whatever happened to my childhood dream of being an astronaut or a ballerina, or a ballerina astronaut? So you can go back and say, I would like to do a career transition. It may have absolutely nothing to do with what you've been doing over the years. Okay, we'll talk about how to translate federal skills to private sector equivalents, how to update your resume, how to fix, update your LinkedIn profile, and critically important. Do not allow your relationship with coworkers and colleagues to fall off the wayside, because those are the people who are going to get you jobs. And so you need to use this opportunity. There's this tendency, number one, to feel embarrassed because you lost your job and to curl up into yourself. Now is the opportunity to go back and network with other people and to do so effectively. And then there are lots of ways you can do freelance work or get training, certifications, freelance, pick up some odd jobs here or there just to maintain your skills, because you have skills. One of the things I do is I frequently write articles for various publications, or I'll write an article to solve a problem for somebody. Doesn't take me very long to do it. I don't get paid a lot to do it, but I get paid something for it, and it gets my name out in publications as well. You want to build a professional brand through writing and speaking. So again, there are people who need to be trained or educated based upon what you have learned. Part of what you've learned is how the federal government works. There still will be, we hope, a federal government, and the private sector needs to understand how the federal government works. You have that knowledge. Okay? Expand and nurture your industry connections. Okay. If you were working in the federal government, oftentimes you were regulating people in industry. If you weren't, you were working with people in industry. If you weren't, you at least probably knew people in industry. So there's conferences and conventions and things like that. One of the problems you have, though, is that when you work for the federal government, if there was a conference or a convention or an educational opportunity that might, and I use the word might, have been paid for by the federal government. Now you're on your own. So one of the things is you have to brand yourself at these industry conferences and conventions as well. Okay. You want to focus on your search on companies that match your values. You want to adjust to new work cultures. One of the things about when I worked for the federal government is there was a general philosophy that this was an 8 to 5 job. At 5 o'clock, 5:30, people would leave. But I was in trial work and litigation. I spent 4 years on one trial where I would get to the courthouse at 6 o'clock in the morning, leave at 11 o'clock at night, 6 days a week for 4 years on one trial. So there are all kinds of different philosophies about how much time you need to be working and all that stuff. But recognize that the private sector rarely has this 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 philosophy. And so the pace will be different. The things you're going to be measured on will be different. I don't want to put in broad generalizations. There's a whole philosophy. Oh, people who work for the federal government are lazy. They are not. They work very hard. They're very diligent. They are just motivated by different things. But don't forget to prioritize your wellness, your mental resilience, and this may be the opportunity to go do something, and now for something completely different. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about resumes, and then we're going to do some practical stuff. There are some major differences between federal resumes and private sector resumes. At the end of the day, a resume is a story. It is not a biography. It is a story. You are telling a story to a prospective employer. And the story you are telling them is, I am the solution to your problem. There was an interview that actor George Clooney gave, and he was talking about his early days when he was looking for jobs, and he would go on auditions and he would not get the job. And then he said, but I need this job. And that was his whole attitude, is I need this job. I want this employer to hire me because I have a problem. My problem is I don't have a job, and I want them to be the solution to my problem. And he said he realized after a while that he was looking at it all wrong. Somebody had written a script, and in that script there was a character, and that character was a 25-year-old farm worker from Kentucky who is an alcoholic uh, and a womanizer who gets his comeuppance when he tries to do whatever. That's the character. The problem for the film company, the producer, is they don't have an actor to play that role. If they don't get an actor, they can't have that role. They can't make the movie. So they have a problem. They need somebody to be a 25-year-old alcoholic farm worker from Kentucky with nuance and complexity, vulnerability, whatever else it is. But they need that. They can't go ahead without that. And so Clooney realized, he says, they are not the solution to my problem. I am the solution to their problem. And when you look at a job posted, they will tell you exactly what the problem is they're trying to solve. And your resume tells a story. And the story always is, I am the solution to your problem. And if you write your resume in any other way than that, it will fail. And, we talk about functional resumes or chronological resumes, whatever else it is. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is your resume is telling a story. It is a screenplay. It is a novel. It is it's the story of you. It is a biography. But at the end of the day, what it is saying is, I am the solution to your problem. Your problem is you need somebody like me. And that can be either because, and by the way, you can be the solution to a problem they didn't even realize they had. When George Clooney goes in to do an audition as a 25-year-old alcoholic, blah, 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 he may bring in subtlety or nuance or a new character trait that they said, you know what? That wasn't what we were asking for, but you have convinced us that you are what we need. So it's not a question of matching skills. It's not a question of matching licenses. That's what the computer program does. Your resume is the story of you. And when I look at a resume, most people will spend about anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds looking at a resume. Within those 5 or 10 seconds, the first thing I need to know is, who is this person? Who is this person, or what is this person? If you can't look at a resume and say, who is this person? That resume hasn't done its job. So you have 5 seconds to say, who is this person? And we'll talk about strategies to do that. But this is the cocktail party conversation. You're at a cocktail party. What do you do? Or in DC parlance, who are you? How are you important? Why should I be talking to you? What can you do for me? That's what happens when you meet somebody at a party and they say, what do you do? They're subconsciously evaluating. Who are you? How smart are you? What kind of accomplishments have you had? What can you do for me? What can I do for you? That kind of stuff. That's what you're doing in your resume. That's number one. So a federal resume tends to be a dog vomiting on a piece of paper. It's everything you've ever done. It's every project you've ever worked on. It's every clearance you've ever had. And what it doesn't do is it doesn't tell a story. You can glean a story out of it. One of my one of the things that really moved me a number of years ago was after 9/11. So after 9/11, the New York Times was given the job of having to write the obituaries for all 3,000 people killed in 9/11. And they did it in a special publication of the New York Times. And each person killed was given 1 column inch. I don't know what that was. 60 words, 80 words, whatever it was. And all of the New York Times writers had to summarize a person's entire life in 80 words. And there's this old story about the person who hands in a 20-page paper and says, it would have been shorter if I'd had more time. And so the idea here is to be able to reduce and condense a person's life to 80 words is an incredibly difficult task. But ultimately, what you're doing is you are reducing your story to those 80 words. Then you're telling the rest of the story as well. But you are answering the question, who are you and why are you here? That's the first thing you look for. And often I'll look at resumes that don't tell me that answer. And I don't know where to go with that resume. So you want to convert your resume from this long and detail heavy names of every agency, blah, 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 to a story. You want to focus on what have you achieved? Okay. The bane of your existence are these 2 words, responsible for. In my house, I am responsible for a whole bunch of stuff. I rarely do them. Okay. Just because I'm responsible for, cleaning the grill or cleaning the car or making sure there's gas in the car doesn't mean I do it. Just means that's what I'm supposed to be doing. You want to focus on actual achievements. Also, there's a whole bunch of Fed speak in a federal resume. You will refer to acronyms and programs and GS levels and things like that. No one cares. Nobody cares. First of all, they won't understand it unless you're applying for a job with a government contractor, and nobody cares. Okay? Hiring managers, okay, I was generous when I said 10 seconds, under 6 seconds. So now you want to shift your focus to, I saved the agency money. I was able to get the agency to do great stuff. I saved lives. I put bad people in jail. Okay? That's what you did. Whatever it is, keep it simple and understandable. You want to focus. So federal resumes list duties, was responsible for, not results. They want results. You want to reframe tasks into achievements with metrics. So if you, for example, were working for the State Department and you were working on the China desk and you were responsible for, say, evaluating or determining predicting the growth of China's economy in the area of the production of widgets. Okay? There are a whole bunch of tasks and skills and achievements that you did. A simple one was say, accurately predicted China's new development of a new generation of widgets, which enabled US manufacturers to respond effectively or to increase production or increase market share in the Chinese sector or prevent domination by the market. Whatever it is, make it an achievement. Okay. Cutting costs. One of the problems you have in the government sector is the way we measure success in the government sector is fundamentally different from the way we do it in the private sector. Private sector will look at things like profits, profitability, um, uh, um, cost cutting, or efficiencies, which are things we do not necessarily look for in the government sector. But you want to be able to quantify your results and always, always, always use action verbs. So we're going to use, like, if I say I'm a GS14, a GS15, an SES1, whatever, that means you've got to start with the assumption that that means nothing in the private sector. So instead of being a GS14, you are now a senior manager. Instead of being an SES, you are higher than a senior manager. If you work with multiple agencies and departments, stress that. All right. You want to use terms that are familiar to private sector recruiters and avoid federal specific acronyms and jargon. You want to focus on what you will do in the private sector that are business relevant skills, and make your resume accessible to non-government readers. And now I want to talk about AI, and I'm going to turn this off for 1 second. Stop sharing. Let's take a quick break for any other questions. Joe, any more questions? You have to unmute.
Quick break. I have lots of questions. We will start back. Okay. Can you speak more to what the hybrid resume looks like, functional versus chronological?
Okay, let me do that. Okay.
Okay.
So when we think about a resume, the one that we created 20 years ago and stuff, it would say last job, job before that, job before that, job before that, job before that. And the problem is, especially if you're 50 or above, you're now referencing jobs you had in the late 70s or early 80s. And there's this function of, number one, that makes you look old. Number two, nobody cares. So a skills-based resume would say, this is what I am and this is what I've done in all the jobs I've ever had. This is what I've done. The problem with that is when you feed that into an ATS system, it's going to say, great, that's wonderful. How do I track what jobs you've had? So what you're going to do is, to a great extent, merge jobs into one. So you're going to take multiple jobs you had. So if you had jobs in 3 intelligence agencies, you're going to list that as a job with the intelligence agencies. And then they'll say, oh, who was it? And then you list the agencies themselves. So you say, this is what I did for 3 different jobs. So you're going to focus on your skills, your achievements, your accomplishments, who you are and what you did. And then list that you did that for multiple jobs.
Okay.
The other thing is, when you feed your resume into an ATS system, you're not going to do it. They're going to do it. It's going to parse your resume and spit it out as a system. One of the jobs, some of the tools I'll show you will allow you to create your resume using the same tools that they use to take apart your resume, so that when it gets taken apart, you'll have some control over what it shows. Next.
Okay. Someone said, as a USAID contractor for MEA, we were not allowed to use the free version of any AI program such as ChatGPT. We could use the paid version.
Yep.
We were advised to use Copilot on MEA's SharePoint server, but I found it not as useful. Okay.
So used an acronym there, MEA.
Uh-huh.
I have no idea what that is. So that raises a point. You have certain acronyms which are embedded in your heart and soul. They are emblazoned in your identity, and you assume that everyone knows what they are. They do not. Okay. Now, if you are no longer working for the government, those restrictions do not apply, except the restriction on the use of classified information. You can use anything you want, yet you still should be using the paid version because of its functionality. One of the big differences between the paid version is the paid version allows you to keep whatever it analyzes separate from the mass of stuff. So there are security reasons to use the paid version, and it's not that expensive. Okay.
Okay.
What
and
what
just
was the acronym she used?
MEA.
Okay, I'm going to look that up.
Okay.
It's probably going to be something very simple.
I'm
And
sure, Monica, you can tell me what it is. You can put it in the chat. So,
okay.
okay, so
I
here's
looked
this.
it up, and it says Mendez England Associates. I don't think so.
Okay, let me get the next question. It says, I seriously see almost all relevant jobs in marketing or health communications at a 30 to 50% pay cut from my last federal role. Do I take the pay cut or apply only for jobs that disclose salary and are at least reasonably close to what I was making? My
So
suggestion to that would be you have to determine what you can live on, because if you can't live on the salary that they were offering, then you can't take the job because you can't support you. But you go ahead, Mark.
let me rephrase that a little bit. You're thinking of yourself as a healthcare marketing person because you had skills in what you did in the private sector, which are similar to healthcare marketing. That may not be actually what you were doing. What you were doing may be closer to healthcare policy or health, because so what you need to do is look at what you were doing and what your skills are and translate that to the appropriate job. So you may be mistranslating what it is. The reason the jobs pay less is not because you're worth less in the private sector than you were in the government sector, but because you're comparing apples to oranges. And that the job you really had, even though it may have had a title similar to that, was actually fundamentally different from what the private sector job is.
Very good. How many more questions do you want, or do you want to go on and?
Give me 3.
Okay. Your LinkedIn profile will pigeonhole into one type of position. What if you are applying for different types of positions? Your resume not match what you have on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is always
Your
LinkedIn should
resume
always
does
be
not have to match. Okay.
Yeah.
Be as comprehensive as possible on LinkedIn. Add everything but add in the right way. One of the problems with government sector jobs, which include everything in them, is they do not tell a story. So look at what I do. My LinkedIn profile includes all of those things, but the resume I send will only include a subset. So on your LinkedIn resume, be comprehensive. In your specific resume, be tailored.
Okay. As a scientist, my federal resume looks more like an academic CV with lists of publications and scientific talks. The longer, the better. That was always the motto.
Right.
In revamping my resume, should I eliminate the list of papers and just include one line that says something like 75 peer-reviewed publications, 3,500 citations, RCR impact factor equals 75? You should put your publications and whatnot on a separate part from your resume. What do you think?
Yes. So the answer is, the answer already. It's a mixture of both. What you're going to do, why is it important that you had how many 75 peer-reviewed publications? Because it shows what you're talking about. Now, it may show one of two things. It may show everything there is to know about a particular kind of flathead worm. Or it may say, I know a lot about a lot of different things. So in other words, go up to the 75,000 foot level and say, what does the fact that I have these publications show? It may show, hey, I convinced people to put my name on a whole bunch of publications. But that may mean it shows leadership, it shows collaborative nature, it shows the ability to identify interesting science, whatever else it is. Or it may say, I do deep research on stuff like this. Or it may show, I have published in chemistry, physics, a bunch of different journals across different spectrums. I understand lots of different types of science, and I can put it together. I'm a cross-functional specialist. So you go back and say, what does this show? And it may simply show that you're very productive, whatever it is. Does it show specific expertise, general knowledge, whatever? Then that's the story you're telling. Make sure your rest of your resume tells that story so that when you say have more than 75 peer-reviewed publications on a variety of topics, finish the sentence. Have 75 peer-review articles which show, boom, finish the sentence. And then say available on request.
Okay,
Now the
we have,
person said, but what that does is it makes me say, cool, I want to see that.
so Mark, this is a 50 plus, a workshop.
Yep.
Individuals are asking. I'd like to hear some tips about getting around age discrimination. I have 20 years of experience with the feds
Sure.
and 10 years before that in nonprofit association. Prevailing wisdom is not to include experience that is more than 20 years old, but my most relevant experience, the job I'm currently seeking is from 20 plus years ago. Also, even if I keep dates off my resume, many jobs require you to apply for a portal which forces you to put dates. So and then someone commented, great question. How do you show and market yourself in the best way as a seasoned professional without appearing too old to perform a new position?
And that's the thing. These ATS systems will force you to put dates on there. They will look for job performance and things. So oftentimes, particularly if you started in the federal government and moved to the private sector, the cool, fun, interesting stuff that you did was what you did for the federal government. And that's what you want to highlight. But that happened 40 years ago. So what do? Again, what you're doing is you're telling a story. So you can work your federal experience into the jobs that you have now. So you want to focus on the stuff you're doing now. But basically, it's sort of like a piece of classical music where you have a theme and variation. You're telling the same story over and over again in each paragraph of your resume. Theme, variation, theme, variation. Now, I don't believe that you can or should hide your age. It's not going to work. Okay, all they have to do is say, what year did you graduate high school? Boom, I know how old you are. And if they're going to require you to the name of, but what you want to do is hide the fact that you're old, because you're not. You can't hide your age, but you can make your resume such that you have current and recent skills. You identify problems that exist now and you can solve them. You have technical and technological competence in things that are happening now. And so your resume will read as if you are a 35-year-old with 30 years experience at being a 35-year-old. So you're not going to hide that stuff. People like, I don't put a picture. Well, the first, I don't put pictures on resumes anyway. But I don't believe in it. But they'll retouch a picture, or they'll use AI to generate a picture on their resume so they don't appear old. Well, when you start the job, they're going to see what you look like. So it's not like you're going to be able to hide that. You want to be experienced and not old, which means highlighting relevant and novel and new experiences. Okay, let's face it. Even though you've been around doing this job for 40 years, it's not like you've been in prison. It's not like you haven't developed new skills. When I started working in the Justice Department, we were using IBM Selectric typewriters. We had a display writer computer to write on a dot matrix printer with an 8.5-inch floppy disk. That does not mean that I do not know now how to use an AI program to help generate content. Just because I have experience using older technologies doesn't mean I don't also know how to use modern technologies. Okay, one last question.
Okay, this is a question that everyone asks. I've always been told that private sector resumes should only go back 10, we say 10 to 15 years as far as dates. So are you saying that's not true?
Yeah, I'm saying it depends. You're telling a story. Whatever best tells your story is what you should be doing. If you, as a general rule, yes, 10 to 15 years is correct because they want to know what have you been doing lately. But if you won the Nobel Prize 30 years ago, you're going to leave that off your resume because, hey, it was 30 years ago. Right?
And just because you did it 30 years ago doesn't mean that it's not relevant to,
Correct.
right.
I mean, look, I was Time Magazine's Man of the Year in 2005. Okay? You think I'm joking, but I am not.
Everyone was man 2005. The
But
people.
not everyone puts it on their resume.
I don't think you put it on your resume either.
I didn't. But the point is, just because you have accolades or achievements that occurred a while ago doesn't mean they shouldn't be on your resume. The more important thing is to tell a story, which is, I am the solution to your problem, rather than some arbitrary number of years. All right. I prosecuted the first computer hacker case. I wrote the federal computer crime statute. I wrote the federal data privacy law. All of that is true, even though I did that in 1986. That's on my, you're damn right that's on my resume. Okay?
This is a, and they're all good questions, but I'm just going to give you this one and then we'll move on.
Now I've got you self-conscious.
What about those who have extensive technical management experience but do not have a degree in that arena? Should you still apply for jobs that state a degree is required, although you have the experience?
All right. So here's what you do when there is a requirement for a degree, a certification, a license, or whatever. If you do not have that degree, certification, license, whatever, and they're looking for it, the ATS system will kick your resume as not having that skill. No one will read whatever you wrote, which means it is critically important that you mention that skill, that certification, that license, or that degree on your resume. All I said was you mention it on your resume. You don't claim to have it. You mention it on your resume. So let's assume that the qualification is they need a bachelor's degree in finance from an accredited university in the United States. And you don't have it. What you do have is 30 years of experience, which can be used to acquire a bachelor's degree in finance from accredited university. Notice the words that appeared there. Bachelor's degree in finance from an accredited university. Now the ATS system will not kick the resume out. So if you're required to be an RN and you have an LPN, okay, and you want to not get that, you say, while I am an LPN, I'm working towards certification and getting an RN, or I'm taking courses in becoming an RN, or I'm eligible for certification as an RN, or whatever. As long as the letters RN appear somewhere in your resume, it will not get kicked.
And again, someone says, so, at the end of the ATS application, they require a signed statement that what you entered was true and complete. You are not saying that you have that degree. What you're saying is that you have skill set that is similar to what that degree would give you. So you
Correct.
mention it so that it's not kicked out of the ATS tracking system. But you by no means you should never lie on your application, and that's not what we're saying. We're saying
Right.
that if there's a skill set that they want or certification, and if you don't have that, then you say I have, and I don't
I have
have
a degree
X.
I have a certification that is similar to blah, 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 blah. Or I'm working
Exactly.
towards, eligible for, whatever else it is.
Or
Okay.
that, right.
You
So you're
shouldn't
not,
lie on an application, just like you shouldn't lie on a first date. On our first date, I told Jody that I was 6'4". Okay. Someday she'll figure out that I'm not.
Okay, so go ahead. We're gonna, I
Are we
still
gonna
have
take are we gonna take a 10-minute break? Because we're now halfway through.
5, just a 5.
5 minute break, and then I will load ChatGPT and we will start playing with it. Okay.
So everyone come back. It's 10:38. We're gonna start up at 10:43. Okay. And Mark, take it
Okay.
away.
Well, thank you. And Monica, I'm just going to ask you, tell me what MEA is. Okay. But
She said something because she did answer. She
okay.
said it's something to do with England. Let's see. Okay. MEA is a USAID consulting firm per it was formerly known as Mendez England.
I got you. Well, I will
Okay.
tell you that for example, it took me a while to figure out what EMEA is. Okay. So the private sector has its own set of acronyms as well. All right. So does Joe, does everybody see the Chat GPT screen? Is that what I'm showing?
Yes. I mean, I see it.
Okay,
Yes. I mean,
awesome.
yeah.
Okay. I'm using ChatGPT because it is a generalized generative AI program. There are lots of other ones. They do different things. I'm focusing on ChatGPT because I have the paid version of ChatGPT, which I find very useful for what I do. There are many, many limitations on ChatGPT. Recognize that all AI programs hallucinate, which means they give answers that are wrong. They also generate stuff in a particular format, and I will show you that right now. I'm going to ask ChatGPT to write an article about how to transition from the public sector to the private sector. Write a 350 word article about how to transition from the federal public sector to the private sector. All right, now I deliberately gave it very little guidance on what to do. And the reason I did that is because when you give it very little guidance, it will follow a particular pattern. And the pattern will be as follows. First, it will do a topic sentence. Why? Because that's what you were taught to do in third grade. And ChatGPT out of the box, when with a prompt, will act like your average third grade essay writer. Topic sentence, introduction, bullet points, point 1, point 2, point 3, conclusion. Right? Because what does it do? What ChatGPT is mimicking human writing. It writes the way it thinks you want it to write. Not that it won't do a good job, but it will be very easy to say that was written by ChatGPT. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger as it does it. Gives me a generic title. There we go. A topic sentence. Okay.
What it didn't do, which it often does, is it will give bullet points and subtopic headings and the like. Now notice what it is. Do I like this personality? I have built into ChatGPT a particular personality that I wanted to use. So I have told it what education level to aim at, what sense of humor to have, and all that stuff. That's all part of what you do. But out of the box, it won't have any of that. So, for example, I can say keywords you want to remember the words same but at a 5th grade level. All right, well, that's pretty bad. So now what it's done is it rewrote it, but it wrote it at a 5th grade level. So part of what you're doing when you're writing stuff with ChatGPT, and we'll talk about what you're going to write and why, but part of what you're doing when you're writing stuff with ChatGPT is you have to understand what audience you have. So now I'll say same, but with a touch of humor and aimed at a professional audience. So what you're doing, and now it got, so notice what it does here, okay? This is a much more interesting story than either of the first two, at least to me. It, like lines like this one here, think less GS speak, more Shark Tank. That brings me into the story. This personalizes it right here. This was a much better story. Now, by the way, if 3 people put the same prompt into ChatGPT, they will get 3 different stories. So what I was doing here is what's called prompt wrangling. I start with a general thing I wanted to do. I give it a topic and a link. It generates something. It's dull, it's boring, it's uninteresting, it's factual, but these facts could be wrong. Then I changed it in terms of audience. Then I changed it in terms of sort of how it the character, the nature of the speaker. Okay, I could do this same, but much more technical, citing specific statistics. Okay, what statistics? I don't know. But citing, by the way, you don't have to spell correctly because it'll fix that anyway. But it's now here's the thing. If you ask it to cite specific statistics, it will do so. It will say the Bureau of Labor Management estimated that more than 50,000 people each year transition from the private sector, from the public sector to the private sector. It could be making that up. So what you want to do is add, give a link to any statistic cited. Provide Blue Book citation. Such. That's a specific legal thing, so that I can go back and find what it's relying on, either as a link or if it gives me the citation. And you see here, so it came up with a statistic. All right. It provided me the citation for the article and a link. If I click on that, it will take me to that article. So this is the last two articles were both very good, but completely different. All right. Now, the first question you're going to have with this is the paid version of ChatGPT. I'm going to mention a couple of things that are good about the paid version, what I like about it, and the reason I pay $20 a month for ChatGPT. Number one is this button right here. This button allows me to upload a file. So I can click on this button, upload from computer, type the word, and upload my resume. Okay. And then I can say a couple of things. Let's start with a simple thing. Based on this resume, what kind of job titles should I be looking for? Okay. So the first place you're going to do in your job search is say, what do I want to be when I grow up? AI can help you with that answer. Okay. So I just asked for a list of job titles. And it's going to give me a list of job titles. It read my resume. And so if you have a government resume, you can upload it to ChatGPT and say, give me the top 10 private sector job titles that most match this resume. Now, when I'm looking in Indeed or something like that for jobs, I know what job titles to start looking for. All right. Or I can say, based on this resume, what are the top 10 DC area employers I should be looking at? I'll say private sector employers. And here it's giving me two choices. It'll do that from time to time. Because by picking which one I prefer, that helps it learn. Now, one of the things that's going to happen if you have a long experience with in the public sector, you'll notice the first jobs it's looking for. This is it for law firms. This is for cybersecurity and data forensics. So it created two different lists. Well, some overlap. One of the problems you're going to have is if you've been in the government sector for a long time, it's going to start picking jobs that are all government contractors. All right. So I can say same, but avoid government, federal government contractors. And it'll then generate a list. So right now we're not talking about rewriting your resume or anything like that. What we're doing is just saying, what should I be? What do I want to be when I grow up? So you feed your resume in, say, what do I want to be when I grow up? And it'll give me a list. Or I can say, based on this resume, what would you say It's a little slow. Are my best skills and accomplishments. Okay? This is before I ask you to rewrite it. In other words, what does my resume say right now? So, policy leadership. Okay? But remember, we talked about writing a skills resume? Same, but focus on transferable skills. What problems can I solve for an employer? Okay. So wait, I was just waiting for this to.
Mark, is there any way to enlarge your screen? That
Yes.
couple people, okay, thanks.
Whoops. Big enough?
Yes.
Okay. That's the boss, by the way, not Jody, the dog. All right. So then I say, same, but focus on transferable skills. What problems can I solve for an employer? That's pretty good. So in focusing on my skills, this tells them this is a problem I can solve for you. Okay. That happens to be true. Okay. Cross-functional communication executive. Okay. So when somebody was talking about, I have 700 articles, I have written a book on exactly this. That would be something I would highlight. Okay. So it can go back and look at your resume and give you an opinion about what kinds of things you can, what problems you solve. It can help you tell the story of your life. Okay. Right now, we haven't focused on how to improve your resume, how to rewrite your resume. This is much more basic. This is just saying, what does my current resume say? Okay. And then it says, would you like help mapping these to specific job descriptions or tailoring a resume? We'll do that in a minute. This just told me one way I can sell myself. So I might want to put in those words, strategic risk mitigator, into my resume. If you guys aren't completely blown away by this, you should be. This was 3 months worth of work in about a minute and a half. This was literally weeks of sitting down with therapists and with analysts and with friends and relatives and say, what do I do with my life and what do I want to be and what am I and who am I and what am I going to do with in the world? ChatGPT just gave me an answer. Is it the right answer? I have no idea, but it's an answer and it's something I can work with. So you can put your resume in there and say, who am I? Why do I exist? What is my purpose in life? You can go even more basic. Based on the resume, what do I love to do? It may not know. Let's see what it says. Yes, that's true. There you go. Yes. Okay. Look at this. Lifelong passion. Pioneering new legal frameworks. It just told me who I am. Recognize that they're going to use AI programs to get these answers as well. If this says something wrong, then you can change your resume until it gets you right. Probably also works on dating sites as well. All right. Pretty cool. Notice I haven't started rewriting my resume at all. This just is my fundamental building block. What does my resume say about me? What are the kinds of jobs I should be looking for in the private sector? What are the skills that I have to offer someone in a private sector? Okay. I can add to this, like, what additional licenses, education, or certifications should I have to get a job in my chosen field? And then I will go further than that. How and where do I get them? And how much will it cost? This goes under the broad rubric of you can ask it anything. I remember when I got my first computer, and it was in 1979 or no, 77. Got my first computer. And the question is, what can I do with it? What does this computer do? And the answer was, I have everything and nothing. I have no idea what it can do. Same thing with ChatGPT. What does it do? Everything and nothing. It's all a question of how you use it. So here we get asked that question. So here's one certification, CIPP. Okay. It tells me what the certification is, why it matters, where to get it, how much it costs. So it will help you identify gaps that employers might be looking for that you can fill. Okay. And all I said is what certifications would be useful in me getting a job in my chosen field. Now, one of the questions was, what do I do if I don't have these certifications? All right. So let's look at them and what my resume actually says about it. So one of them is a certified information professional from the International Association of Privacy Professionals. I don't have that degree. I don't have that certification. However, I am a frequent speaker at IAPP events. I know the head of the IAPP, and I've written articles that people use to get a certification in this. I could put those facts on my resume, which would include the letter CIPP-US, and this would show up on my resume. I'm not going to lie, but I will say, attend annual conferences of IAPP and speak and teach classes to assist people in getting CIPP certified. Both of which are true. All right. CISSP. Again, the issuer is ISC squared. I don't have that certification. However, I was counsel to ISC squared and developed the criteria for obtaining that degree. That will be on my resume. Those words will show up on my resume. Okay. I helped develop the standards for the EC Council. I don't have the degree, but I helped develop the standards for them. That will be on my resume. I taught courses for GIAC and for SANS. Both of those will appear on my resume. I developed the FBI's criteria for use of NCASE. Okay. I've lectured dozens of times for ISACA. I've taught at the Harvard Berkman Klein Center. So I can put all of that in my resume and boost the chance, even though I don't have these certifications, I can boost the chance. I've also taught at the MIT Sloan Center as well. Okay. So I could boost my chances, or I could end up getting these certifications. So those are all things you can do. You can help it perform a gap analysis on what you need to do. So that will get you the skills that you need, the certifications that you need, an idea of what your resume currently says about you, what the tone and tenor of your resume is. I haven't touched anything yet. I haven't changed anything yet. All I've done is say, what does this say about me? All right. Now I could upload a public sector resume and say, for example, what are the key differences between a public sector, federal sector resume and a private sector resume? What should I do to convert a federal resume into a private sector one? Now notice this is a generic question. What I could do, because I have the ability to upload documents here, is I can say, what should I do to convert my resume into a private sector one? Now, even if you use the free version of ChatGPT where you can't upload files, you can cut and paste. So I could copy my resume, dump it in here, and ask the same questions. It's just easier to do it with ChatGPT, with the paid version. All right. So shift in language, structure, and emphasis. All right. Focusing on marketing tools, value, results. And here we go through it. All right. In a federal resume, 4 to 10 pages, your target length is 1 to 2 pages. Format, paragraphs with narratives of duties. Okay. These are bullet points, shorter and to the point. Bureaucratic, duty-focused, job announcement oriented. Results-driven, active voice, industry-focused keywords. Titles, GS15, program analysts. Titles that reflect what you actually do. This kind of stuff. Nobody cares. Okay. Bullet points, bullet points, bullet points. Okay. So these will tell you some styles, like things to do. This is the bane of your existence. Your resume should never say Bain was responsible for supervising a team. Okay. Even this is too weak, I think. Okay. So I can take this sentence, paste, and say, make this even more action and results oriented. Okay. Now the other one was short. This one is much more powerful. Of course, you want to check to make sure these numbers are correct. But this is what it did. Okay. It identified how I did it, what was the problem, how I solved it, and what were the results. It shows me as a strategic problem solver. Remember, it already identified that that was my key skill. So what it's doing is going back and rewriting my resume to focus on the fact that that's my key skill. So the first thing you're doing here, I used to be a paramedic, and there was a saying in emergency medicine that the first thing you do is you take your own pulse. So what we're doing here is we're figuring out what we are. Take our own pulse. Figure out what job we want, what we want to do. Figure out what am I doing? What is my job? What is my function? What can I do for the team? Then you ask ChatGPT, what does my resume say about me right now? And then look at what it says and say, yeah, but what I want it to say is the following. And you can say, suggest changes in the resume to emphasize, boom. Now, what we're going to do here is a little bit different. But I'm going to go now to Indeed. And I'm going to look for Chief Privacy Officer. Okay. We're going to focus on privacy. No, 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 no. All right, let's take this one right here. All right. Now, there are a couple of things. Remember I was talking about earlier the George Clooney effect. Somebody has a problem and you want to be the solution to their problem. So one of the things it's going to do is it will tell you what the problem is they're trying to solve. And it did so in this paragraph. So let's see what somebody wrote this. That's what you're forgetting. Somebody wrote this. And in writing this, they are telling you, we have this problem, we need a solution. It's like in a movie. If in act one of the movie, the character tells you, yeah, I dropped out of MIT. That's not a throwaway line. That's intended to tell you something about the character, which will be important later on when either the fact that they went to MIT becomes important or the fact that they dropped out of MIT becomes important. So every word they put in here is a signal to you about what they're looking for. So, number one, key legal leader. They need a leader. Okay. Second, partnering with our product engineering, marketing, IT security teams. They make something. What do they make? No idea. But they want to make sure that the product they have is compliant and blah, 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 blah. Working with the engineering team means translating legal requirements into something engineers can understand. So you tell them, what I do is I go to the sales team and I find out what their requirements are. And then I take those requirements and I give them to the engineering team. And they'll say, well, why can't the engineering team speak directly to the sales team? No, they can't do that. That's, by the way, from Office Space. All right. But that is to be able to collect data, understand what's important, communicate effectively. This sounds like this is not a skills thing, but this really is. So your resume needs to scream, this is what I do. I figure out what the problem is, figure out what's necessary, communicate that with it, and follow up. Okay. Next, integrative commercial real estate company. If I have any experience in commercial real estate, put it on the resume. If I understand commercial real estate, put it in the resume. If I have cousins or relatives or whatever involved in commercial real estate and I have some understanding of commercial real estate, put it in the resume. Okay. So, and right here, it's telling you what it lists as responsibilities is telling you actually what it's looking for. Right there, AI implementation. I'm going to make sure my resume has AI in it. Data licensing. I'm going to make sure that I have that in there as well. Okay. Compliance. That word is going to show up in my resume. Collaborate and coordinate closely. My resume will say in every one of the jobs that I've ever done how I collaborated and worked closely with other people. Negotiation and complex technology. My resume will say that over and over again. Okay. What they're saying here is we don't want you to be a roadblock. We want you to make things happen. All right. And we don't want you to be a weasel. It said it needs this. My resume will have that in my resume somehow. They talk about KSA. So watch this. I'm going to take this and go back here. And I'm going to say, rewrite my resume, this job, focusing on optimizing the resume for ATS review. Make it the best you can. Okay. ATS is applicant tracking system. It's an automated computer model that they use.
Yeah. All right. So did mine.
Uh,
Okay.
Jody, I hear you, Jody.
You hear me?
Yeah, it's Mark.
Okay. Come.
Tell him to stop
Okay.
the video. His
Stop.
video.
Yeah. Stop your sharing, and then you can re-enter.
Okay.
Okay.
When I teach for the Career Gateway, I teach a program in job interviews on Zoom and the like. And my motto is everything that can go wrong will go wrong at the worst possible moment. So I actually, if you look in here, I have this computer, a second backup computer, my phone, a third backup computer, just in case. So we are prepared for these things. Anyway, what I was doing before my computer just crashed is looking at this. Let me get back to that. All right, so when
You're
you go to a
showing
job,
you weren't showing the right screen.
am I showing
You're showing
Indeed?
Are you meaning to
That's what
show
I
Indeed?
wanted. That's what I wanted to show. Okay. So what you do is you look for a job. Let's say Cybersecurity Council. You look for a job. And then you pick one. This one here. Okay. Let's assume you pick this job. Then what you can do is scroll down here. All right. And let's assume I was applying for this job. I can go back to, I guess, ChatGPT just crashed. One of the good things about ChatGPT on the paid version is that it has I don't know if it has it on the free version or not, but I do know it has it on the paid version. We'll just let that load. It will preserve all your previous requests. Let's close some stuff. Okay, so you'll see here. I'll go back to chat. By the way, ChatGPT can also substitute for your Google searches and stuff where you're currently doing searches in Google. You can do it under ChatGPT. But what I can do is where I have my resume, and it's, I want to just close a couple windows that might make it a little easier. There. Let's see if it works better that way. I can take my resume and take the job description, dump the job description into the resume, into ChatGPT. Close that as well. All right, so here's ChatGPT. Here
Mark,
was what
someone just asked, any concerns regarding uploading this personal information into the program?
Yes, but ChatGPT says that it does not use the personal information. ChatGPT says it does not use the personal information that you put into it as part of its training model. And it doesn't sell or distribute it. So I have some concerns about privacy and security, but it's a balance. I wouldn't put anything really sensitive in it, but the whole point of your resume is to get that resume out there, right? So now what it's doing is it is reading my resume and optimizing it for an ATS system. Okay. It added certain things in here like this: artificial intelligence, Internet of Things. It added these core competence. It added, now you can put acronyms in a private sector resume, but they have to be the right acronyms, the acronyms that a private sector employer would be looking for. Okay. So artificial intelligence, machine learning, privacy, and ethics. It added actual metrics. I will take this out because this is not true. Okay. This is not true. Okay. Some of the stuff it put in is not true, but you see what it did. You didn't see my original resume, but
It focused on bullet points. It focused on actual accomplishments. Now, one of the things I did here, notice there's a huge gap. 1983 to 2015. That was the way I compromised on that question about how do you show. So this is going to show a huge gap. All right. I don't mind showing a real gap because this isn't a real gap. I had lots of other jobs in between there. If the ATS system is looking for, so you see what it did here? Expected, eligible, in progress. Okay. By the way, none of this is true. I would go back and rewrite these. Okay. So you can't take it as gospel. This is how I dealt with the idea of many publications. So instead of mentioning the publications, I said I would probably write here more than 2,000 articles. Click here to see them. So that's one of the ways to deal with it. It's not the only way. But now what I can do is I can take this job put it in here and say, rewrite the resume for the following job. Emphasize that I worked with Senator Schiff on the prosecution of former FBI agent Miller for espionage. Here is the job description. And now what it will do is try to match what they're looking for to my job, to my resume. Now notice that the resume it spit out was not very good. It had a bunch of bullet points which were not right. Okay. It had characteristics which weren't good. Again, we're trying to get at the horse. So now we'll take a look at what it did. Okay. Same, but FBI agent Richard Miller. Okay. So I can get it to change these things. So you're going back, it's an iterative process. Normally to just write one resume to tailored for one job will probably take 10 to 15 prompts back and forth to get it where you want it to be. You can take individual lines in your resume, individual accomplishments, and say, how would you rewrite this for the private sector? How would you rewrite this? So you can take individual lines, entire job descriptions, okay? So now, let's say, show new resume. And let's see what it did here. So now it will change that. Notice what it did also. My resume no longer has my address on it. It'll take that out. What it did do is it said Washington, D.C. or D.C. area. Okay,
so they know that I'm local. It gave an email address, which I would take out and give a different email address, but it made it more modern and simpler. Okay. And then I would say same, but focus on policy and legislation as well as PhD in policy studies. And I'll rewrite it. So it's an iterative process back and forth. You have to be careful because it will make stuff up. Now, you can tell it to, we were talking about ATS systems. This is a program called Job Scan. It's a paid for program too. There's a free version. And what this will do is it will scan your resume. It is here. You upload your resume. It will scan it. Here we go. And so I will take like Chief Privacy Officer. Okay. These were titles that the generative AI told me were jobs that I could apply for that I thought was good. Okay. And now it's scanning my resume for the qualifications for the job I told it for. It's going to match them, find gaps, and suggest ways to improve my resume for the ATS system. So that's an AI generated tool that will take my resume and make it parse it for the ATS system. The other way to do it is to use an AI tool like My Perfect Resume. All this is in your materials. And in My Perfect Resume, which is just one of multiple tools that I can use to build a resume. So here would be my resume here. And it will build the resume and also help me with a job search. So here's like a resume check. We'll analyze my resume for an ATS system and recommend things that I can do. There are 18 suggestions here. So let's take a look at this one. View suggestions. Include quantifiable results. See examples. And will give me suggestions for language to put into my resume. So we can go back to each of the. Now, one of the things I want to point out, you see what it did here when I built the resume. It forces me to put in title, location, start date, employer, descriptions, bullet points. The reason that's good is because I built my resume using the same tools that a ATS system will use to unbuild my resume. So it will have this built the same way. So it'll give me a resume strength. It'll tell me what the gaps are, and it'll tell me ways to improve it. Also using AI. All right, I'm going to show you some other things we can do with ChatGPT. What are some interview questions I can expect? Let's say some difficult interview questions I can expect. based on my resume and this job description. So here are some questions. Okay, and then I can say same, but also suggest some really good answers. Now you're not going to, so here it mentions Trump versus Mazars, Eastman emails, okay? You need to know this stuff. I happen to know them, but yes, okay? So it gives me suggestions and suggestions of questions. So I better know what section 702 of FISA is, okay? I better know these acronyms. So now I say, okay, let's do that. Give me some cool answers. Now I'm not going to memorize these, but watch, the answer is actually going to be pretty good. All right, so that's one good way to do it. You unmute, Joe.
Yeah, someone asked, do you recommend first to go around, the first go around, that we put our federal resume in the system so it can help us to customize for specific jobs?
If you have a federal resume and it's up to date, yes. Okay. Otherwise, what you can do is you can use other tools to build a federal resume and then deconstruct it and rewrite it. Right? That's what I would recommend. So you're going to have a federal resume. You have it sitting around and stuff like that. You're going to update it, and then you're going to completely trash it and rewrite it to be a private sector resume.
Someone said I have used JobScan a bit, but find Jobalytics to be easier to use. Do you have any thoughts which of those two platforms is more effective?
No, I don't have thoughts. Whichever one you find easier to use it. Okay. You can even do most of that stuff in ChatGPT. All right. One of the things that the paid version of ChatGPT has here is this deep research. So under deep research, you can then take some topic and have it really churn away on very deep analytical research. So if I want to write an essay or something like that, that's fine. But if I really want to do deep research on something and have some confidence in it, deep research is a way that I can use that too. It uses the latest search engine. One of the things you'll find is there are multiple versions of ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is 4.0, but ChatGPT 4.5 is a more advanced version. So you can use different models if you have the paid version. The other thing is what I was talking about is right here. All of the ChatGPT's chats that I've had in the last several months appear here. So if I, for example, I had some question about property tax assessment. Put it in here, it came up with an answer. ESPN vape ad discussion. I don't know what that was. Okay. But they're all here, so I can search my previous searches and find them.
Someone had a question because there's a lot of questions like what's the difference between the free and the paid. Someone said for the chat GPT free, does it count the number of prompts used and store that in cookies to be able to use the free version? Iteratively, does clearing cookies or changing browsers give you the ability to do more free prompts you can use? Is the max free time reset at the end of the day, or can you use it again the next day?
It is a monthly basis. There's a limit to the number of searches that you can do, and the depth of which the searches are, and the versions. Okay, whether you can use and I don't believe that it stores your searches either. I'm not sure that whether it allows you to upload files. The other thing you can do here is you can also link your Google Drive, upload from Google Drive. So you can add dozens of files for it to review. So one of the things I could do is I could, in the paid version, say, take all the articles I've written, read them, and then next time I ask you to write an article, use my voice, make it sound like me. You can do that in ChatGPT in the paid version.
Okay. Any particular setting that you advise for uploading your personal information? Like if you
No.
turn off the history features, does that protect the information?
No.
No. Okay. Someone said I definitely took my home address out of my resume. Yes, we highly agree. Putting your LinkedIn profile URL is good. Cell number, or sometimes people put just the city and state in which they live.
Yes.
If you're, that's often helpful to an employer if they want to find out if you're local.
Yes.
So someone said I've done this with my resume, but then when I cut it out of ChatGPT, it doesn't format well to transfer it.
Correct.
Tips to doing this? Oh, okay. So tips.
One tip is to say at the end of your ChatGPT and use this as and make it a downloadable Word document. You notice one of the things here when it wrote my resume here. Created it as a downloadable Word document. And so
And then someone said, so for ChatGPT, would like a 10-page base resume be best to cull down for a 2-page final?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a 10-page resume, you say, make this a 2-page resume aimed at the private sector, aimed at jobs in finance, particularly in analytics. Okay. Emphasize core strategies, core competence, and make this interesting and compelling. So what it did here is it took my resume and turned it into a Word document, preserving certain formatting and function, because I told it to make it, I would have told it to make it a Word document. Now, to me, too many bullet points, and too short. But you're going to play with it.
Okay, someone that's a good question. They're all good questions. Within another employer's ATS, I was asked about social media pages that included Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I understand that some corporates look at those pages also. Provide some advice. Should we update the Instagram, Facebook pages for professional purposes? If so, how can AI be utilized for this purpose? Clean up your social media when you are applying for jobs. And go ahead, Mark. Okay. Oh, you're putting it in the chat. Okay. You're putting it.
So I'll tell you what I do is right now there are a lot of people in the private sector who are terrified of having anybody, okay, say anything that might be even the least bit controversial. So this will tell you tools that you can use for optimizing your social media. Okay, but I want to remove anything controversial from LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. What is the best way to do this? Okay. And then it'll give you a roadmap on how to do it. Now, there are things within ChatGPT where I can create a GPT. I'll explain that in a second.
Let's get the answer here first. It tells me tools that I can use, manual deletion, things like that. Okay. And then it has a step-by-step. What do I mean by controversial? What words do I want to remove? Okay. How do I automate it? Depends on how much you've posted and the like, but you can do that.
And we are not recommending that this writes your resume for you. We are recommending that you use the tools to enhance your resume. So, like, so
To give
someone
you
had
ideas on what things your
right.
resume can and should
Someone,
say. You
someone
saw
had
one
here,
of the things is it got a lot of stuff wrong.
right. So you have to read. And someone asked here, a lot of my chat GPT resumes seem really vague and don't have specific accomplishments. It's just very bland. Do I ask for more specific things? I actually did in the iterative process.
Yes, this is an iterative process. You're getting to the horse. You say, this is bland. Make it thrilling, make it exciting, make it detailed oriented, focus on accomplishments, focus on metrics. Okay. Make this an outstanding resume. You can use words that you want it to do. Okay. Make it a powerful resume. Make it compelling. Make it so that everybody wants to hire me.
And someone said you can ask it to stick to the facts provided within your resume. Exactly. That you need to make this your resume. This is not, X's resume. This is your resume with your accomplishments and who you are. It's just going to give you ideas on how to how to achieve that. So Mark, there was a question about cover letters. Can you talk a bit about cover letters and whether and how they figure in private sector hiring? And yes, I mean our attitude about cover letters is not everyone will ask for it, but a good cover letter can make a difference in whether you are looked at or even actually hired. So so if you are going to submit a cover letter, make it worth the your while. And when they do say you could submit a cover letter, it's optional. Submit a cover letter because it just gives you more ability to introduce yourself. Now, Mark, talk about.
Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. Back to that other job. So I'm copied the job, and I'm going to give a simple for this. Okay, so generic. Has my resume, draft me a cover letter. So you'll see it did two. They're not that much different. Okay. But what they are both now is sort of a rehash of my resume. Neither of them are particularly good or effective. One's a little bit longer. Okay. So how do I make this into a better resume? Cover letter. Keywords you want to remember the word same but. Same but. Focus on what I can do to transform Walker and Dunlop. And specific measurable goals I can help them achieve. Focus on my results in other jobs. Make the letter exciting, compelling, and interesting. Okay.
Let's see what it does now. All right, so it started by talking about them. Then it talked about me already having the job. All right. I've put myself in that job and told them what I do. Really a great idea. Okay. AI, it talks about AI not as a tool, but as making AI into a competitive advantage. Okay. Much better cover letter. Okay. But now let's say same, but make it a bit warmer and friendlier. Make it so they really, 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 really want to hire me.
And Mark, we have some questions about how do you translate your federal title to a private sector title? How
Okay.
you could do that?
Somebody type a federal sector title into the chat, and I'll give you an example.
Okay, can someone type their title into chat?
So
Anyone?
what you're doing here,
Okay.
by the way, yeah.
Team lead, program manager, yeah, team
Okay,
lead,
what agency or department? Type that in next.
audiovisual production specialist. Can you put like team
Okay.
leads from, okay,
I am a
public
team.
affairs officer.
Okay, I am a public
Oh, here, HHS supervisory public health analyst.
HH. Okay, HHS.
Mhm.
What is it? Full title?
Supervisory public health analyst. Oh, there's a lot of good titles.
What is a comparable job title in the private sector? And just that. Okay, let's start with
Okay.
that.
Data policy, compliance study, your tech study. Oh, that's great.
Now that's telling you what kind of jobs to be looking for. Okay.
Mhm.
But let's take a look at public health analyst. Okay. If you have a specific job title, that title is your title for your job. Okay. But in your description of what you did, okay, your description of what you did, you want to describe functions like this in it. So you may keep the title, but just change it to something in the description of what it is that is more meaningful to them. All right.
Now, we are at noon. Mark will go, 5 minutes past since we had a little glitch for those who would like to stay on. And then will you answer some questions?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. So two things I want to emphasize that you can do now. All right. Number one, you can use ChatGPT to analyze your resume and tell you what you need to do, what kind of jobs you want. Two, it can help rewrite your resume. It helps rewrite your resume. You can do either throw the resume in, say rewrite it, but a better approach is to take line by line. How would I rewrite this? How would I rewrite this? How would I rewrite this? What skills are here? What accomplishments can I emphasize? Okay. To help you write the cover letter, and even things like say, who do I send this cover letter to? So it'll say hiring manager. You can say, can you look up who that hiring manager is? And that kind of stuff. It can do that as well.
It can also, you can tailor your resume and cover letter for the ATS system. You can use it to help write articles that you can post on LinkedIn. You can say, who are the top 10 people I should contact in this field? Give you ideas of who you should friend and who you should link with. So there's a whole strategy out there, and ChatGPT and these other AI programs can help you as tools to achieve those results. Okay.
Okay.
Let's take a few questions.
Sure. Okay, I'm just looking. So here's someone said that I found that team lead, which is his current title, is quite common in private sector as well as government. But the roles having that title in private sector tend to be much more junior, i.e., leading a team stocking shelves at a supermarket. Would you recommend using a different title on my resume to describe my more senior public sector role? And everyone, yes, just as Mark's typing this in, this is being recorded. It is still being recorded. It will, when we finish up, we will download the recording onto JCA's workshop webpage where you registered. So you could always get the recording. And again, if you want the materials, I provided the link for you to get the materials for today's workshop, as well as it is on our workshop webpage, the link to the PowerPoint and the course curriculum. And we will be sending a follow-up email today with that link as well. So,
And here are your answers right here. And so actually did a pretty good job.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Okay, depending on what kind of team lead you are, you can pick. Okay.
Okay. Someone was asking, and this is always a great question. And someone asked it again. What is the percent match with job qualification and responsibilities? Like when they put in a job description and they list all the things that they would like, and you have some of them, but not all of them. Should you apply?
Depends on, well, first thing is this a job you want? Is this a job you can do? If the answer to both those questions is yes, all right, let's assume you have a 50% match. And you assume that the ATS system will reject you at a 50% match. Explain why, even with a 50, first of all, do the things to optimize it, including whatever certification stuff, mention them in your resume. But then explain why you are the solution to their problem. You have the right answer. They just happen to ask the wrong question.
And remember that it's a wish list for an employer. There's no human being that satisfies every wish list on their on this job description. So if you feel the the bulk of them, and there's some that you're missing, or but let's say you need a certain certification, but you have work experience that really satisfies that, then you talk about how your work experience satisfies that credential. So we would tell you to apply, unless if you have to meet some of the majority, the bulk of the qualifications, but there's no candidate out there that satisfies every qualification. That is like a superhuman.
Right, but also part of what you're doing in telling the story is explaining why they want what you have. Okay, you're George Clooney applying for a job, and the role is for you're a 25-year-old actor, and the role they're looking for is a 70-year-old grizzled veteran. You can't convince them you're a 70-year-old grizzled veteran. What you can convince them is that really the 25-year-old person is what they should be looking for, because they bring a certain optimism and naivete to the position rather than the gravitas that a 75-year-old might bring, and that changes the story and improves it in this way. That kind of stuff. Convince them that you're the person they're looking for.
And this, yes, would you recommend staying away from graphs and lines on your resume due to ATS?
Yes.
Keep resume bullets and paragraphs.
Yes.
Yes, because that might look pretty to you, but an ATS tracking system will kind of
strip it right out. It'll be gone.
Yes, it'll be gone, and it will be look very wonky. So, yes. Okay. Let's get to some of these. Let's see. We had some really great questions here. I'm gonna go here. Go up here. Okay. Is there a way to put in the job posting and ask GPT to modify your resume to make it align more to the job posting?
What was the question again?
Isn't there a way to put in the job posting and ask Chat GPT to modify your resume to make it align more to the job posting?
Yes. You know what you do? Put in the job posting and say, align my resume more to the job posting.
And you can do that with your cover letter too.
Yes.
I mean, you can to make okay.
Yes.
So someone said, when I see that we're responsible for on a federal proposal resume that I'm rewriting, I ask them, but what did you actually do? What did you accomplish? So, yes, exactly.
Exactamundo.
I've spent 25 years in the same USAID office serving in several evolving roles. What's the most effective, concise way to present this on my resume?
You just did. You just did.
So how?
I spent 25 years in the same agency at USAID solving problems for them, including boom, 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 boom. I made them a more effective agency. I achieved the objectives of the agency. I made the world a safer place. Okay.
Yeah. How do you mark? You don't just saying I have 25 years of experience just indicates that you're old. So you need to talk about, just as Mark just indicated, that what have you done for that agency over those years and all of your accomplishments.
At USAID, our objective is to prevent global war and turmoil through programs that promote peace and understanding among organizations. For the last 25 years, I have been dedicated to this goal by running a Food for Peace program in Nigeria, running a program that got diseases cured in Gambia, okay? Understanding and learning the culture, blah, 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 blah. I can take those skills and help you sell more widgets because I've learned how to understand goals and objectives, understand cross-cultural problems, to change those cultural problems into solutions, implement the solution, pull together a team, find out the problem, solve the problem, make the world better for mankind, all while getting home and cooking a wonderful, the world's best macaroni and cheese. Whatever. That's a story.
In your opinion, how difficult is it for women over 50? What hurdles do we have to overcome? And in your opinion, how can we market ourselves?
If I understood women over 50, I would understand women under 50. And if I understood women, the answer is we all have challenges, we all have skills, we all have opportunities. Be the solution for something. Yes, an ATS system can tell your resume was created by AI, and you can tell your resume, your AI program, to make it sound like it wasn't written by AI. This is warfare. At the end of the day, your resume will not be written by AI. There will be suggestions in it for AI. You will write your resume.
Okay, this is also, I've seen this a couple times. Can employers know? Can they do? I mean, can they recognize a chat GPT resume?
So here's what you do in your prompt. After you're done, you say, "Great. Now make this look like it was not written by AI," and you can go beyond that. Make the sentences varied length. Okay, write this towards a more sophisticated audience. ChatGPT help with career transition options? Sure. Just say, what are my options? You can ask it anything. Recognize that it'll get stuff wrong. But yes, you can tell ChatGPT to do certain things. Here's the first thing. How do I instruct ChatGPT to not make it look like an AI program wrote it? And they'll tell you varied sentence length, sophisticated audience, add a little bit of humor to it. Okay. You can upload a bunch of the things you've written and say, put this in my voice.
Yeah. So, and also can't chat GPT help you with interviewing? Can it
ChatGPT can suggest interview questions, interview answers, topics of discussion. Okay. You can actually put ChatGPT into audio mode and then it'll read the question, you'll give an answer, it'll record it, and then give you feedback.
Very cool. Are there any other burning questions by the audience? I mean, I I know. Is there any other question that you feel if it's not answered, you will not be satisfied? if there is, just put it in chat and we'll get it answered. I'm trying to see if
All things, I was asked to end with some words of encouragement. Okay.
okay.
All things will pass. You will find a job and a career you will love, and that you will love more than the job you had before. Okay. Your job is not your life. And this is an opportunity for you to go back and become the ballerina, the astronaut that you always wanted to be.
Okay, there's a couple other questions. Do we stay away from DEI on our? I mean, some individuals had jobs that dealt with DEI.
No, nobody had a job that dealt with DEI. DEI, as it's used by certain members of the government, does not exist. All right. There's no such thing as DEI. What you did is you had a job which found the best people with the best skills that represented the broadest sector of the constituency. Okay, so guess what? That's not DEI. That is just smart hiring, smart promotion, smart recruiting, which is what you were doing anyway.
Can you confirm that someone said, I heard that LinkedIn is the place to put a very comprehensive full career history?
Yes. That was easy.
Do employers use AI to read the LinkedIn web pages instead of reading it themselves?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well,
Okay, I
the answer
noticed.
is sort of. Yeah, LinkedIn prevents scraping, so that it has its own AI tools that it sells.
I noticed your about section on your LinkedIn page is in third person. Why do you recommend that? In third?
Because the omniscient first person was taken.
Okay.
I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt have none other but me. That was taken.
We do, and there's terrific LinkedIn training in the Career Gateway, and our facilitator offers a 2-day LinkedIn boot camp. Highly, if that's something that you're interested in, I highly recommend you reaching out to me because we can get you registered for that, because she's up right and current with regards to what's happening in LinkedIn, and we do offer LinkedIn training during our 5-day Career Gateway program as well.
So people had some specific questions for me. How do I do this? Where do I look for this? Short answer is ask ChatGPT those same questions, just the same way you just asked me.
Can you offer some good resources?
Yeah, that was one. Just look it up in ChatGPT.
Okay. Community during your job search join. Okay. Okay. So there's check the chat, and guys, if you want to save chat, there's some really great tips in here. Go up to the page, and if you don't know how to save chat, there's 3 little dots on the top and you click it and it says save chat. Press that and you will save chat, because there's some you guys are, great resources for each other as well. So, and there's some great suggestions in here from individuals. So anyway, well, we are going to conclude today. Thank you, Mark. And thank you all. You all were troopers. You stayed on for the full 3 hours. We thank
And
you.
more.
Thank you, Justin. Justin, if you can make sure you save for me as well.